So, thank you very much. This morning we got some sad news that there was an explosion which led to several persons in the Guyana Defense Force losing their lives and one person being injured. Now, first of all, I would like to express my deepest condolences to the families of those who lost their lives, and I hope that the individual who is, or soldier who is injured, would recover quickly. I also like to urge the Chief of Staff to do all that is necessary to ensure that the Army gets to the bottom of this explosion, and also to send my regrets and condolences on behalf of the People's Progressive Party to the soldiers. No doubt they must be grieving too, because they lost colleagues. Now, I hope that the investigation will look at what took place, because one would have expected that if we know the pyrotechnic ordnance is unstable, then greater precaution should have been taken. And we knew that the pyrotechnic ordnance is unstable, given that just a few short months back, we had another explosion which resulted in several casualties. And so I hope that that is explored also, because there was knowledge that this ordinance was unstable. Nevertheless, I once again would like to express our deepest condolences to the families of those who lost their lives. As we await the recount of the votes cast on March 2nd, the country is becoming more frustrated. And we in the People's Progressive Party, we have recognized this frustration based on our interaction with our supporters and others, some who never even supported the People's Progressive Party, because they see this as unending, and they see their lives and their livelihoods, I should say, deteriorating before their very eyes. And they recognize that only a legitimate government could lead the response to ensure that we come out of this political crisis, the economic crisis, and the pandemic. So they're very worried about their futures, given that many people now are out of work. A lot of families can't even feed themselves. We have had a ton of requests for help, and we are doing all that we can as a political party, but our resources are stretched to the limit, given that we fund our activities based on donations. But we will continue to do all we can to ensure that we extend help to as many people as possible. But this requires a legitimate government acting with a clear plan in place to ensure that the pandemic doesn't become worse in Guyana, and secondly, to ensure that people get the help now, and a government, a legitimate government, that could plan for the future, the restoration and the reemployment of jobs and the reemployment of people and assistance to the business community, so our lives could go back to some sense of normalcy. What we have seen so far from this administration is First of all, they're in hiding now because many of them are ashamed to venture out, given that they are defending and they were part of the cabal to steal the elections. So many of them are ashamed to show their faces in the public because of this, and they should rightly be ashamed. Because they're trying to steal the will of the people, the votes of the people, and they're hoping to benefit from this. Secondly, this government and the cronies at the top, the ministers and the advisors and the others, they continue to receive huge salaries and benefits. So they're well off. They don't care too much about the ordinary people who are struggling. They have recourse to the treasury. And therefore, they're in no sense of hurry. There is no urgency on their part because they are living the good life. Thirdly, we have seen an inept or incompetent response so far to the pandemic, to information about the pandemic. And the good thing about our people is that they read a lot. They get a lot of news from the internet, from looking at the international press, and the local press has been doing a fairly good job to get information out to them. And luckily, our people have responded because many of them have been, they've stayed away from the streets, although you do have people on the street. But I've seen our response here compared to many other countries. We're just driving around during the day and you see the place is practically empty. And there are a few instances where there are lapses, but on the whole, our people has taken the COVID-19 threat seriously. And that has helped to dampen the curve so that we have not seen this explosion as yet. And then we still don't know about the extent of the infection because many people are asymptomatic, and because the testing levels are so abysmally low, again because of the incompetence of this government, we don't know the true extent of the infection. Therefore, that could give us a false sense of security. We've seen, again, incompetence with how this government has treated essential services or first responders, the police, the army, or healthcare workers. They have not been given the kind of protective gear that they need and the kind of support they need. And therefore, we've seen quite a few infections and in those sectors, particularly among frontline people. Then what doesn't also inspire confidence about this government's approach is the fact that they have been using billions of dollars in a corrupt manner. Look at the case of the hospital. I dealt with it last week. They're building a hospital on land that the government doesn't own, that's owned by one of their cronies. They don't have a contract. They never went out with the owner of the land. They didn't go out to bid, give the contractor the contract without any tender, and they don't know what the contract price will be. But the Minister of Finance said it would be over $1 billion. So and that is not expected to come into being shortly, given the pace of the work that's being done. Even that, there's no sense of urgency. So this is what we have seen overall is an inept response on the part of the government to this crisis, and what compounds the problem further is they're illegitimate. They're hanging on, they're attempting to steal the elections, and to hang on to power, and everyone knows this. So this is the state of affairs. And what doesn't inspire much confidence is the recent decision of the president to put Joseph Harmon, rather than a competent technical professional, to be the chief executive officer of the task force. He has decided to move a lot of his political colleagues, Archer and Paul and Harmon, to manage the secretariat. And so you know how partisan these people are. First of all, corrupt, and secondly, partisan. And the resources that will go to help people from various organizations, local, etc. I saw ExxonMobil giving some money, and the Rotary Club, etc. Those resources are going to be squandered or stolen or be used in a partisan manner. And I want to urge people who give donations to ensure that there is a safeguard, that they don't, that they either send the material over or use the resources in a manner that is done. Now, one of the things, I'll come back to that in a moment, because it's one of the issues they're talking about on the elections. So I hope that we can have this issue, the recount, done expeditiously, so as to ensure that a legitimate government in place that can address people's concerns. Now, you have heard a lot of nonsense about the PPP doesn't want to have the recount, or the PPP is going to challenge the recount process in court. So this is part of APNU changing the narrative scenario. You recall the motive that Harmon made public for the ill-fated dossier, the one that they lied about to the Guyanese public, not just to the Guyanese public, but to the U.S. administration, where they made a false filing into to the Justice Department. The motive of that was to change the narrative away from rigging the elections to red herring issues about the PPP's ostensible closeness with China. I think by now that issue has been put to rest. And then resurrecting conspiracies about the PPPs linked to Russia, and I think everyone knows that is nonsensical too, about the Russians rigging the elections in Guyana. And thirdly, about the PPP being linked to drug dealers, etc. That's the narrative they were trying to push in Washington, so that people will not, the congressmen and the administration will not focus on them trying to steal the elections in Guyana. They also pushed that narrative in Washington, that they won the elections, although most people there know that it is not so. So I have seen several attempts by them to, and they've been urged by their PR handlers, the Adam Harrises of the world, and the David Hines and Lincoln Lewis, that they must change the whole narrative about the elections. So what I just show you a few of the things this dishonest things that they've been putting out. So the first thing is, APNU, we support a national recount. This is posted on their page and on Sandra Granger's page and Mr. Granger's page. So I suspect that one person is doing this and posting it to all the pages. So we support a national recount for integrity, for credibility, and for transparency. GCOM must be allowed to complete the recount of all ballots. Two, why are the PPP so against a national recount of all ballots? Do they have something to hide? Count all the ballots. Honesty, decency, and integrity. President David Granger and the APNU AFC coalition support a national recount of all ballots. And four, the PPP are trying to frustrate the recount process after losing the elections. All Guyanese must support GCOM and support the national recount. Now, the fact is, we in the PPP, we responded to a few of the things. First of all, that the PPP was trying to frustrate the recount, and two, that they won the elections. So we said to, in our press release responding to this new narrative, first of all, why, if you won the elections, there's a simple thing that you can do to show that you won the elections, because the dispute has been around the fraudulent declaration of Mingo of the results of Region 4. Now, every observer group has said it's fraudulent. It doesn't match the results of the elections. Two, all the local parties and NGOs have said the same thing. The courts have set it aside, yet only one group is claiming that the results, Mingo's result, as a result of Mingo's declaration, fraudulent declaration, they won the elections. That is APNU AFC. So there is a simple way of proving or disproving the PPP's contention that the Region 4 results would lead to, if you include that with the results of the 9 regions, they show the PPP winning by a margin of at least 3 times more than what they won the elections the last time. At least 3 times more votes. So it's simple. The PPP put up its statements of poll. There are 879 polling places in Region 4. We uploaded all of our statements of poll. We uploaded the tally sheet signed by, and these statements of poll are GCOM's copies. It's signed by all the officials, the political parties, including APNU people, including the APNU polling agents. We also uploaded the tally sheet signed by the presiding officers, which support those statements of polls from most of the places. It's a simple thing if you won the elections. APNU has all of these SOPs, the statements of poll. APNU has all of them. Why don't they upload them and say that, look, the PPP had for the ballot box at Soesdijk, that they got 100 votes and APNU won 50. But APNU actually got 200 and the PPP got 75. It's simple to do that based on their SOPs. But they will never upload the SOPs because the night of the election in Congress Place, when they tabulated the SOPs for Region 4 and for the country, like we did at Freedom House, they knew they lost the elections. They knew they lost the elections. So that is why they're paranoid about you mentioning statements of poll. They just pretend as though they have a collective amnesia. They're blank when you talk about statements of poll. From Granger to Harmon to Volder Lawrence, who signed the declaration for Region 4, unheard of. You can only have the RO signing the declaration, but her signature was on there too. And you notice they've gone quiet about that, how her signature got on the Region 4 declaration, the fraudulent one. But they go blank. All of David Hines and Christopher Jones and the Adam Harrises and all of the others and the riggers, Roysdale Ford and everyone, they don't want to talk about statements of poll. They don't want to release their copies. Why, if they won the elections, they should be only too happy to do that. But they know because they've tabulated them, the statements of poll. And they know if they release them and the recount shows a different number of ballots in the boxes, that it would show that APNU was part of the problem. And so that brings me to, if they won the elections as they're putting out on all these little PR pieces that they're doing now to change the narrative, to fool people again. So they claim they won. Why is it that the three commissioners at GCOM representing the APNU AFC will vote with the chair against making the statements of poll public? Not public. Actually, Granger in 2015 made a plea to GCOM to release, 2011 rather, to release the SOPs. GCOM took into consideration when he was opposition leader and made public, release it to the public, as Charles Romson said, Commissioner of Information, that these are public documents. They are posted outside of each polling place. So GCOM in 2011, based on his pleadings before them, made a decision to make it public. Now, in 2020, the PPP, through its commissioners, put forward a motion to make the original copy of the SOPs, that is Lowenfield's copy of the SOPs, available to the commissioners. Not to the public, just the commissioners, so they can see the original to see if it has been tampered with, and to make copies to give to them. So they voted against it. So if they're so confident about a win, why not let the SOPs, which have been used in every other case, in Region 1, in all 9 regions, the SOPs were used in the tabulation processes by the tabulation process by the ROs. In all the other regions, except for Region 4, it was used for half of the process, when over 400 boxes, and there was no difference between our SOPs and GCOM and the other parties. And suddenly, when they stopped using the SOPs, then the votes, they escalated significantly for APNU based on this spreadsheet, fraudulent votes. So any person who goes out to defend them, the first question that any interviewer or any sane person should ask them is, why not release your copies of the SOPs? If you believe you won the elections, why not disprove what the PP said? Why not let us see what GCOM copies are to see if they've been tampered with, etc. And that will put to bed who won the elections, because we know, based on the undisputed tabulation, that the People's Progressive Party won the elections by a healthy margin. They won the elections. So that deals with these propaganda pieces. The first point about APNU winning the elections. And secondly, about PPP trying to frustrate the recount process. Now, clearly you have these are not only riggers and thieves, election thieves, and they have been stealing the resources of the treasury too. So that too, but they're election thieves. But they have no shame whatsoever. They have no shame to say to the public that PPP is frustrating the recount process. First of all, it was the People's Progressive Party that went to court to get the Mingo's fraudulent declaration set aside and to have a recount of Region 4. So the PPP wanted the recount of Region 4. Secondly, they did not want to go ahead with this. They went to court to block that recount several times. And at several, including their cronies at GCOM and also APNU lawyers, went to court to block the recount. Then Granger and I met with the CARICOM team. He said he would like to have a national recount because there are some issues in the other regions. We said, because in good faith, we said once the recount of Region 4 is done first and they're proven, we don't have, which will show definitively we won the elections, we don't have a problem with any other recount in any other region, provided that that is done. So what happened next? Granger and I signed this agreement, MOU, but it was his people, Roysdale Ford and another one of his candidates, who went to court to say that the recount that Granger and I agreed to was illegal. And we had to go all the way to the full court, the Court of Appeal, to get that decision. The People's Progressive Party fought that to get that done, to get that the decision of the judge in the original court overturned. So they tried to block the recount, and they wanted to use Mingo's fraudulent declaration to announce the overall results of the elections. And they got Lowenfield to use Mingo's fraudulent declaration and put before the commission a report of the CEO that showed they won, including the fraudulent results. That is what happened. So they frustrated the recount then. The CARICOM team came in, and they had to leave. And then you saw the statement from Prime Minister Motley, the chair of CARICOM, saying that there are forces in Guyana who don't want to see the recount take place. And we were not those forces, because it was Roysdale Ford and the APNU people who were going to block the recount. So, as to who is frustrating the recount, you can see a pattern now. One, who argued for the recount, who in Region 4, who tried to block it, APNU. Two, when there was an agreement on a recount between Granger and I, they tried to block it again. Thirdly, it was Lowenfield, supported by the three APNU commissioners, who came up with a recount that would last 156 days. So we submitted to the commissioners a proposal to have the recount done in 10 days. In 10 days. And this is, so you can again see who was trying to frustrate the early completion of the recount. We then had issues of Valda Lawrence sending a team to fumigate the convention center when the CARICOM people were here, as though the fumigation can kill COVID. We have recently seen, even now at this stage, another attempt by the guidance from the COVID task force. Remember, they wanted to quarantine the CARICOM team for 14 days so that nobody will come to Ghana to be quarantined for 14 days to be part of a count. Thirdly, we've seen this preposterous proposal that you will need 33,000 masks to complete the recount. Now, that every half an hour you will have to change the mask. Now, that is nowhere in the WHO guideline. No, nowhere whatsoever that every half an hour you have to change the mask. It speaks about 6 feet apart, social distancing, or keeping on your mask, or a combination of the two. But nothing of that sort, excepting if you are frontline and, you, for example, a healthcare worker, or your mask gets wet, or there's blood on it. Now, imagine Volder Lawrence and the others want us to have 33,000 masks to change one mask every 30 minutes. If they were doing that for the healthcare workers in Guyana, and the nurses and the doctors and the others, the porters, etc., everybody must demand this now. That if the doctors come there, I heard the doctors recently said they could go to 2 hours now. But if that task force is saying 30 minutes, you have to change. It means that every healthcare worker on a 24-hour shift must have 48 masks. 48 masks for every healthcare worker for 1 day, for 24-hour shift. So we will need 60,000 masks per day for our healthcare workers if they were following the guidelines that this COVID task force wanted to impose on the people counting the ballots in a low-risk environment. So now they've changed it to every 2 hours. So that means that if you translate it into the healthcare sector, our health professionals must demand 15,000 masks per day if you have to change your mask every 2 hours because they're working on the front line. And if they're requiring a 2 hours change in the mask for counting of ballots, then they must do the same in the health sector. So, and if they don't, they're abdicating their responsibilities. The same doctors and the same COVID task force, that if they don't supply at least 15,000 masks per day to the healthcare workers alone. Of course, they're not going to do it. But this was another attempt, even at this late stage, to frustrate the process. And this task force is controlled by Nagamotu, Harman, Volder Lawrence. So you see who is trying to frustrate the process. You see who is trying to undermine. So they talk here in these three public relation pieces they're putting out about transparency, integrity, honesty. Imagine they're still talking about this. The riggers, the people who are trying to steal elections, are talking about transparency, integrity, and credibility. Now, they have none of this. The people who have voted against and have gotten the chair to vote against live streaming are APNU people. Now, what is their problem with live streaming so that all Guyanese can see the recount? Clearly, this was APNU trying to undermine transparency of recount. It was APNU who voted against the removal of the compromised staff. So now the compromised staff is handpicking other staff of the Secretariat to do the recount, rather than using the ROs and the others, the deputy ROs, and the polling the officials. It is APNU who voted against that. It was APNU who voted against an auditor being present to observe the poll. And it's now APNU who is trying to take us outside the law. So you can see this is all propaganda. First of all, they didn't win the elections, they lost the elections, and they know it. The whole country knows this. They lost the elections. And if they think by some miracle that they are going to change that result, they're wrong. Or weaken the international resolve or our resolve. And I'll come back to that in a moment. But they're wrong. They lost the elections. They're the ones who've been trying to frustrate the recount because they know this. And so they're frustrating the recount. Hopefully, they think that if they delay this, they'll not only remain in office for a bit longer, but they may be able to spring something on us in this delay to change the results. And it is APNU who has voted against any measure to ensure transparency in the recount. So when I see Sandra Granger and David Granger and the others posting this, I know it's part of their general PR narrative to change their role in this whole saga, the role of being chief riggers, a part of a conspiracy. Harman, led by Harman in the government and Valda Lawrence, and in GCOM with Lowenfield and Myers involved, and then a series of lawyers and others who are part of this attempt to steal the election. So they want to take our attention away from that by now claiming that the PPP is trying to delay the recount. Consistent with that plan, the Chronicle carries everyday headlines. So today's headline was PPP plans to challenge recount. And they're using this based on some letter that was sent by Anil Nandalal on my behalf to Claudette Singh. Now, clearly, they must be in close contact with Justice Singh. But our letter just argued, it says that the Justice Singh again went to the Chronicle and justified the killing of the live streaming proposal that would have ensured transparency on the basis that it was unlawful and the law didn't permit it. We wanted a meeting to show her not only did the law permit, as we pointed out in the letter, but it would enhance transparency in the process. That is what we requested. And all the political parties have requested that meeting with Justice Singh. Secondly, we wanted to point out that when the proposal that they agreed to start with Region 4 when CARICOM was here, they agreed, the whole commission, including Justice Singh. Then that morphed into an agreement by the commission to do 2 regions at the same time and to complete them. Now, in the latest version, they have Vincent Alexander and Lowenfield have gotten involved in, they're now doing 4 regions at the same time. So that means 4 sets of tabulations, 4, you have to go into 4 containers. They're hoping to create enough confusion around the process in an attempt to rig it. And guess what the work plan says and the order. So District 1, which is Region 1, which has 18,000 voters and 99 boxes, will have 2 of the workstations. District 2 will have 2 workstations. That's Region 2, 2 workstations. They have 135 boxes and 37,000 voters. District 3, with Region 3, will have 3 boxes, 3 counting stations. They have 355 boxes and 100,000 voters. And District 4, Region 4, will get 3 counting stations too, like District 3, but has 879 boxes and 285,000 voters. and that they will be counting District 4 whilst they're counting the other regions too. So their plan is not to conclude the count on Region 4 so that they could, hopefully, they can create confusion around the other regions. And this is because they know once Region 4 is completed, and if they won Region 4 and they have you go to the boxes, then you should be interested in completing it. But they're mortally afraid. APNU, Lowenfield, Roxanne Myers, Vincent Alexander do not want to complete Region 4. And I'll tell you a little bit more about why that is so. And then the third aspect in our letter to Justice Singh is that the recount must be conducted in strict accordance with sections 84, 60, 11, 88, 89, 1, and 90 of the Representation of the People's Act. Because there was no clarity in her decision, vote on that. She said the decision is in the plan. But when we look at the plan and the order, they have in there something that is specifically prohibited by the Representation of the People's Act. It says here on chapter 89, this is on the Representation of People's Act, 89.2. It lays out how the count must be done, and that's what we are asking them to observe. And it says the returning officer shall not open the sealed packets containing tendered ballot papers, marked copies of the official list of electors, or part thereof, or counterfoils of used ballot papers. So they don't want to do a recount. They want to go to what is specifically prohibited by the law, counterfoils, and to go to how people voted. They want the list of how, and that's part of the order. Now that could be deemed illegal in the future, and they're hoping to create confusion around it. So then when they create a ton of confusion, so let me give you an example. If they get this, and you have 100 people on the list, and the presiding officer, 75 of those people were voted, but the presiding officer just sat down and ticked off 71 of them, then that becomes a problem. But this has nothing to do with the numbers of people who voted and who were observed to have voted in the polling place. And it's specifically prohibited by law because it's capricious and it's not an observed activity. It's just the presiding officer sitting down and ticking. So this is where the narrative from Congress plays, and that is what I want to bring to your attention. We have solid intelligence that they know that the votes, once you count the votes cleanly, that the PPP will win the elections or has won the elections. So they're trying to create, by departing from the law now, with the complicity of the chair of GCOM, to move to what is specifically prohibited by the law. Check the Representation of People Act. What is specifically prohibited, to create confusion surrounding the recount. So Lowenfield has now been training people about this. And so these are handpicked people by Lowenfield. And then they have something called an observation report, where will be the cause for confusion. But it is transparent. We know what the plan is. And once you know what the plan is, we'll be looking out for it. Now, what I want to say, I know that a number of people, including from the staff and the people who will do the recount, whoever they are, that they must not be part of any shenanigan. Already, Lowenfield and Roxanne Myers and the others could go to jail for fraud, and many people there. Don't be part of that process. It will be exposed at one stage or another. They already lost the elections. They're not going to be there. The international pressure will not weaken. And so if you're part of that, then you become complicit. So do a professional job. And I know people are going to give us information if the instructions are, because some have already been calling, apparently people have been identified already, to talk about they're not doing anything illegal. So if Lowenfield or Roxanne Myers or Pittsburgh or one of the others in there who are now still part of the process because of APNU vote and the chair, who the international community called for their removal. And I was watching also the international community. If they give you any legal instruction, please let us know and let the international community know this, so that that appropriate action could be taken. And therefore, that's what I say. Do a professional job. Don't get into people who are doing the recount. So this is what APNU's hope is. By getting Vincent, Alexander, and the others to include things outside of the recount that is provided for by the law, they're hoping to create some doubts in the night. That is why they're insisting that the 9 other regions be counted before Region 4 is completed. Because when Region 4 is completed, you will see, once the ballots are not tampered with, and then you will see that the PPP won the elections. But that is not going to succeed, because if they try to tamper with it there are 2,339 opportunities to expose them, because the boxes will be counted one at a time. And the moment that because you'll have party reps there, the moment that they deal with shenanigans in a single box, we will expose it to the international community, because we'd have the SORs, the Statement of Recount, and we can point this out immediately to the international community. So if they think that they're going to change this or try to create confusion surrounding the recount, the list didn't have enough people tick off that our presiding officer. And effectively, these 2,339 presiding officers were selected by Lowenfield, not the PPP. They were selected. The ROs were selected by the Lowenfield. And so if they try to undermine their work now by casting doubts on the work of all of these people, by saying they did something illegal or wrong, they are undermining their own people. So that is people who are chosen by GCOM. So those people should have an interest also in ensuring the integrity of the recount, because it's their work that is being tested. And so, including their names and their signatures on the statement of poll. So this is what we, when Chronicle said we want to challenge it, we are not challenging, we don't have any intention of challenging a recount that we fought for. We continue to have grave concerns about its transparency, given that the chair has voted on several issues with the rigors at GCOM, and the cabal still exists there that may try something. But the good thing is that the international community has remained resolved, and our party agents will be there. We have issues about the movement of the boxes, the containers, about how the containers will be taken out, and the boxes, the safety of those boxes that we'll be speaking about further. So there are lots of issues we wanted to discuss with the chair, and that is what we are hoping to do by that letter. But Chronicle said the PPP plans to challenge the recount, which is consistent with their narrative that we don't want the recount. From the beginning, we are the ones who've been pushing for this recount, but that it be done transparently. So there are a lot of things that we hope that the CARICOM team too that is coming here will look at the integrity of the entire process, how the containers are moved, etc. Because when they get here, they have to comment on the integrity, I guess, of the entire process, and so that people are allowed to observe and be part of securing the boxes and the containers as they've been doing now. We have a number of people who every night, and I must say thank you to all of them, every night are out there watching these containers and boxes. They're doing a great service to our country, and we want to thank all of them for who have been doing this. Now, I need to, so part of the additional narrative is that they now spread rumors and write stories vilifying people who they see are key to the recount. So they want the international community to disappear. They want the observers to disappear. They want everybody to disappear so they can continue stealing the elections. Now, we know that the local observers, including the private sector commission and the private sector, has been in the forefront of exposing and fighting against some of the shenanigans because their interest is in free and fair elections, not a particular political party. I recall the private sector commission in 2015, and the same members, many of them are here, they're at that time. When they came to Freedom House and met with Ramatar, they said, accept the results of the 2015 elections. The same private sector at that time was not in the PPP's corner. It was in, we could have accused them of being in APNU's corner, but they were talking about the elections and results. They urged us to file a petition at that time. This private sector now is not alone in its condemnation of the attempt to steal the elections. It is the labor movement. The churches have condemned it. The Bar Council, the many NGOs, all the political parties in Guyana, many individuals who support APNU. Every international observer group that came here, the Carter Center, the European Union, the OAS, the Commonwealth, CARICOM, they all made it clear not only that the results for Region 4 were not credible, but that any government sworn in on the basis of those results would be illegal, illegitimate, de facto. The U.S. threatened sanction. So why single out the private sector and certain individuals in the private sector for character assassination? It's because they hope to dampen the enthusiasm or the fight against their illegality. And so Jerry Govaya has been singled out. Now, Jerry Govaya was supposed to have flown the diplomats on election day around the country in 2020. And it is a big problem because somehow in their warped minds, he influenced the diplomats. Not that the diplomats and the observers saw Mingo trying to steal the elections with Valda Lawrence and all the others just there. Not that they saw that, but that somehow because they were flown by Jerry Govaya to observe the elections across Guyana, that he may have influenced them. That is only the negative warped mind. And for people who are uninformed will buy into that. But in 2015, Jerry Govaya, when APNU won, Jerry Govaya flew the diplomats around the country too. There are pictures of this in the newspapers. He flew them there. Did he influence them to win the elections in 2015? It's utter nonsense, but it's character assassination. So Adam Harris apparently got booted out of Kaichor News. Even Kaichor News could not stomach his vile partisan behavior, APNU justification, election rigging justification behavior. It was so irrational and so vile. So now he is part of the Chronicle machinery, which is state funds used by APNU to character assassinate Jerry Govaya and the others about going after personal things. They have self-interest in the PPP winning the elections. Nobody has self-interest, as though he doesn't have a self-interest in APNU winning the elections. I don't know about Jerry Govaya's self-interest. I see him fighting for something that the entire international community and the others. He's not a member of the People's Progressive Party or anything like that. Jerry Govaya has criticized the PPP too. But in this case, Adam Harris is a direct beneficiary of a lot of the things. Adam Harris, people like Christopher Jones, who got some land from the people, got it from Lands and Survey people in South Georgetown who've been living there illegally. You have Harman and his friends, the whole corrupt cabal, Trotman with his vast empire, and Volder Lawrence and all of them who've been siphoning off funds from the Ministry of Health. This is the corrupt cabal. Who has a self-interest? Who is enjoying the perks in office? He's talking about self-interest by other people. And Adam Harris is, and the APNU machinery. So they have two things: change the narrative, character assassinate people, bully them into going into submission so that people will accept this. But let me make it clear. There is no accepting the rigging. There is no accepting. The moment we do this as a country, we're done for. We're done for. And there will be no acceptance of the rigging. There'd be not just foreign consequences, but if they think we're walking back to normalcy and that they will drag this out. One other narrative that they have, that they've been feeding into the system, is that, and I no doubt telling Granger, in fact, two things. One is that, and they've been peddling, they should last until November. So somehow, if the Democrats win the elections in November, that the Democrats will have a different view about their role in the elections. Well, I know because we have had outreach to Democratic congressmen, and I know Yvette Clarke and the others who came here, and some other congressmen who are part of the Democratic Party, senior placed congressmen like Gregory Meeks, etc., who Granger promised to have credible elections, made promises to them that they issued a statement condemning it. And they just don't understand. They think that the Democratic congressmen will also support rigging in Guyana and lack of democracy. So it's the Harman gang is telling Granger they can survive if they last out until November, the elections. That's one thing they're peddling. The second thing that they're peddling is that, they're not going to get sanctions, never mind what the U.S. said, because that they will be able to avoid sanctions. And they're using the recent release by the United States of America of over $2 million to the fight against COVID, to Guyana in the fight against COVID. So obviously they're telling Granger, look, the first people are saying they're not going to give us any money, and now we're getting money from the U.S. and we'll be able to survive this. So I think part of the internal planning, it could be that Granger banished Harman to that area, and I'll come to that in a moment. So they may be telling him this. Now, the U.S. Embassy, from sources in the U.S. Embassy, and this is public, that the United States of America has two programs in Guyana, humanitarian and elections. Now, the humanitarian program, from what has been explained to me, is not dependent. It goes to the help goes to the people. So Venezuela, that where the government is not recognized by the United States of America, the president, or the de facto president, is not seen as the legitimate president, they still get help, humanitarian help. Iran gets humanitarian help from the United States of America. So to claim that somehow this is a normalization of the events, and that somehow that the world may take the signal from the United States of America and start funding them, it's a misguided notion. The first thing is that the 475,000 from the CDC came out of an allocation for the Caribbean. And then the 1.7 from USAID came from a global allocation. But the United States Embassy has made it clear that not a cent of this money is going to go to the government, that it's help to the people of Guyana. And so all of this money, over $2 million of it, will be administered by international organizations and or local NGOs. Not a cent will go to the government of Guyana. And I suspect once that explanation hits everywhere else, including the World Bank and other places, then it's going to also condition how they approach this issue. First of all, the government is illegal, illegitimate. They're not caretaker. Granger only retains his position there, but on the Attorney General. The others are imposters. They shouldn't be collecting salaries, etc. The others who call themselves ministers, prime ministers, etc. They're imposters. So that's the first reason. And the second one, now with Harmon there, you can never guarantee transparency in the use of money because he has a history of not using money transparently. And the people know that, including the international community, because they've been watching him. And so, so this is the new thing, is that I saw a press release that came out from the Ministry of the Presidency saying, oh, Nagamutu had it wrong, that look, they're getting money from the international organizations when the US made this announcement. Well, they're not getting it, not the government of Guyana. This is an allocation to the country, to the people of the country, and will be administered by NGOs and by international organizations. So they must be telling Granger, oh, we're going back to normalcy. Look, there is a weakening. Well, as far as I know, the signal from the international community is that this is the last chance to resolve this issue in a democratic way. And if they try to tamper with anything surrounding the recount, the people are not stupid, we are not stupid, then it will be exposed. As I said, we'd have 2,339 opportunities to expose any attempt to tamper with any box, because that's how many boxes you have, and 2,339 attempts. Chances to do that, because after it's done, we'll get a copy of the SOR. And you will see, because it can depart from the ballots in the boxes. No matter what little fringe thing they use, how many people tick off, and which list got ticked off by a sleeping presiding officer, didn't tick off enough names on the list. Therefore, something is wrong there. So that's not the key issue. It's a ballot in the boxes. And therefore, they don't have, this is their last way to get out of this situation with avoiding sanctions. I know people are watching them closely, and individuals, including some individuals in the media who have been perpetrating this issue. Well, part of the cabal, the rigging cabal. There are a couple of people who have been doing this. So we now have to, as I was saying before, all of these excuses, Congress place as this cabal. Oh, let's delay the vote until the recount, until the US elections, as though that will change anything. That will not change. Secondly, we're getting help from abroad now. We can go back to normalcy. Three, their instruction to Lowenfield and the others to try to find something to cast doubts in the other regions, delay the count in Region 4. These are all things that we are aware of. We are aware of. And therefore, we're watching carefully. And the international community is also aware of it too, and is looking out for all of these issues. I hope that the president's removal of Harman was genuine. I hope that because Harman is a humbug to progress, he and his family and friends have been beneficiaries of large amounts of state assets, and his removal as Director General will be a strong signal. But I gather he is the only conduit to Mr. Granger, that the Granger gets information from him and he relays information through him. And therefore, I don't know, the information may be warped or suited to the Reagan purpose or the Reagan efforts. So that I hope that that we ensure that Harman doesn't get his hands. A number of people think it's a strategic move by Granger to create the impression that he is okay with all of this, that he's okay. He wants transparency and he wants the recount done, and the others might be hampering his effort. I hope that's the case because he can fight back. He is not without powers. He's the head of the party and the president of the country, and he has powers as such. I gather there was a meeting where they were bullying him to reinstate Harman because Harman seems diminished in the eyes of people, and he's worried about that. So I hope that Granger, if his efforts are genuine, he doesn't succumb to that Reagan cabal. But that is if his efforts are genuine. I just want to say, somebody brought to my attention that there have been a document circulated, no doubt from their PR machinery, and posted by people like Imran Khan and Christopher Jones, etc., that Irfan Ali, Mark Phillips, Jagdeo, me, and Zulfikar, the executive secretary. Notice the prime minister, the presidential candidate, the general secretary of the party, and the executive secretary of the party. We all have COVID, and that there are 3 nurses coming to my home and being treated by Carpen. I haven't seen Carpen for quite a while. There are no nurses coming to my home. It's all false. And that's how I was chubby in the past. And I had a gastric bypass in New York because to get slim. Well, I've been a struggle because in the lockdown I'm eating too much bread, etc., to keep the weight off. But it has nothing to do with a gastric bypass. The thing is that it would have been laughable had there not been a tragic side to it. If APNU and its key leaders can trivialize this, the infection and that their political opponents have COVID and that they're being treated surreptitiously, etc. It's to undermine confidence in people. And I thank them because thousands of people literally have reached out who believe the propaganda to find out if I'm okay. And I have to say to them, I'm okay. I wouldn't have dealt with it otherwise. But it's all a rumor. And if you can spread rumors about COVID, what if we were to say that Granger's been ill? You know, Granger had major problems before the elections. He's had to take treatment for cancer. If we say he has the coronavirus, we'd not say that because it would be irresponsible of us. This is not something you wish on anyone, especially or spread rumor about anyone on. And it's a virus. It's not a stigma. At some point in time, most of our people will catch it. It's like the common cold, unless you have a vaccine before that. And hopefully, most of our people will survive out of it, or all of them would survive, I should say. So they are trivializing this stuff. And again, it's Adam Harris and the cabal, the APNU cabal. But they're so desperate. They imagine, because they have nothing else to talk about. They're totally incompetent. They don't have a coherent response to COVID, and they don't, and they only know one thing, is to run down their opponents and spread rumors about them. When we talk about them being riggers and thieves, I say that with full knowledge of what they have done, because we have evidence of it. And that whole gang there is made up of riggers and a bunch of hustlers, and living well off the taxpayers' money whilst the country suffers. There are a few questions that came in. Would there be a constitutional crisis that if the recount will go beyond April 30th, 2020 deadline? I think I dealt with this before at a previous press conference. Basically, you should have the parliament convene 4 months after its dissolution. This matter was tested in court as the Attorney General, because he's still Attorney General, he's not Minister of Justice. Basil Williams said that this matter went to the court and it was tested. And it says that it's not mandatory, it's directory. So it means that it's not fatal if it's not concluded, but it's a tragedy that if it's not convened, but it's a tragedy that it has not been convened, that almost 60 days after the elections, we don't have the declaration of results. We can't start a recount. We can't do it transparently. And we don't know when it would be completed, because the chair agreed to 25 days and to I don't know, extend it if possible or whatever else. And when the observers, including CARICOM and the others, are saying they can't stay here for so long. So that is the tragedy in this all. But if it doesn't, people were thinking, oh, they can then argue, go to the court and argue they want fresh elections. By the way, that is what they were saying internally, that if you cast enough doubts using the stubs and tick off lists on the voters list about which names the presiding officers ticked off and which they didn't. By the way, that will violate the secrecy of the vote too. So Claudette Singh can't be concerned about the secrecy of the votes and allow a process that could violate that. But that if they create enough doubts there, they can argue for fresh elections. These elections have to be completed. There's no way we are going to fresh elections. Absolutely none. And I've canvassed the international community, and they said they're not interested in that, Because what do you have fresh elections for? To repeat the entire process again? This process where they'd attempt to steal elections, so nobody is interested in that. The second question, what safeguards do they have in place in the Treasury so that the caretaker government does not squander all the resources? Now, they have done things contrary to the law. Now, the financial laws of the country are very clear. Jordan is not a minister, shouldn't be signing any orders as minister, shouldn't be signing anything that deals with access to resources as minister. Now, the orders about how the conduct of the disbursement of money should be done. The law governing disbursement of money is quite clear about 112 provisions and all of that. We made it clear that we are now opposed to people's salaries being paid, the pensions being paid, etc. We hope that the pension and people's salaries could get more to them in an electronic way or a way where they don't have to be exposed to coming out, but nothing else. So money for their cronies and their own spending, etc., would be illegal. So the law is quite clear governing our finances. But this government has a way of not respecting the laws of the country, including the financial laws. That's why I said they know that they didn't win the election. There's going to be a change in government. It will come sooner or later. And if they violate any of the financial provisions, Jordan or anyone else, they're going to face consequences to this, because you can't prevent. They act with impunity. They do illegal things, although they know it's illegal. They've done so with disposal of land and all of that sort of thing. But there are consequences to that. Is there any update on the second Mingo declaration? Can they use it to swear in Granger? Should they cause the recount to run amok? Well, that is their clear intention. That is one. That is why Vincent Alexander has been arguing against setting aside the Mingo declaration and the CEO's report. And they now held it in abeyance. That's the word being used. So that doesn't change what the international community says. So assuming they create problems here, hoping to go back to that, the Mingo's declaration, which the international community has made clear that it's fraudulently put together and that any president sworn in on the basis of Mingo's first or second declaration would be illegal and illegitimate. That doesn't change the view. There will be sanctions. That doesn't help them to get out of this without any consequence. Has the PPP considered the declaration of Dr. Irfaan Ali as a president, as in the Venezuela situation? This will have massive support in Guyana. We have promised the international community, and so far we're sticking by that we'll await the official declaration to see if it is legitimate. That is why we're giving this process an opportunity to work. But should that process, should they tamper with this process, or alternatively try to sabotage it to return to the old Mingo declaration, then this is a possibility. This is a very real possibility. If CARICOM does not land in Guyana by next week to start the recount, what course of action will the PPP take? I gather the CARICOM team will be coming in this weekend. Will there be other election observer missions coming to look over the recount? We're hoping that this would happen, but given the COVID task force and their attempt to sabotage this. I don't even know if the chair, although a week ago they passed a motion to invite in the others to come back. I don't know if this has been done, but we've been pressing them to return to Ghana. What will the PPP do to hold the chair accountable? We have been exposing how she is voted. This is, I think, the ultimate test of accountability will be with the people of this country, and that in the public domain. That is why the 10 motions were put, so that people would see how she is voting on these motions, and they can then judge her on the basis of this. Will the PPP call for personal sanctions for the APNU AFC coalition officials? Yes, we have called, and we will, should this not end well. Should they try to tamper with this process, there will be no other choice but to aggressively seek not only personal sanctions, but against the country. We made it clear that the exports from money from multilateral and bilateral sources, no loans, no grants, that the oil proceeds, all, we will ask for sanctions to be placed so that they against them, so they're not at the disposal of the government. The lockdown is due to end in a few days. Do you support extending it or gradually reopening of the country? I think you have to look at this. I'm all at the beginning because I said we needed to balance the total lockdown with the necessity of people earning and doing this. I see people are finding a right medium at this stage. I think this must be a decision made on the basis of facts where we are on the curve and an assessment by the professionals, that the professionals should guide the politicians in this and not the politicians without all the facts available guide the professionals, but with a view of balancing economic needs, that is people ability to get food, to eat, to earn a living also, or helping them to get some assistance to do so whilst we're taking care of the pandemic. But there must be more guidance. I don't have all the facts because we don't have all the reports from the health, the professionals. What is being done to ensure that workers without an income get support from the government? This is something we've been talking about. The government has chosen to utilize the resources, the help that it got so far in a partisan way. I'm not even sure that it will do so. I'm aware that they are not transparently procuring stuff, that they are using the resources they have there to go to cronies and to their friends. Look at the case of the hospital. Just imagine taking the $2 billion or so they will spend on that hospital and using a part of it for assistance to people. How much more people would be able to cope with this situation. So these are some of the questions that I got. I think these are major issues today that we have. So we will continue to be vigilant. I want to urge everyone to also be vigilant, to make sure that this is our last opportunity to fix this and that it be done expeditiously. Let me say the PPP wants the recount. It wants the recount done expeditiously. It wants it done transparently. It has been pushing for the recount. It's APNU who's been frustrating the recount. The PPP has no plan to challenge the recount in court now. This is all a fabrication by the APNU, and they know they lost the elections. They know in APNU that they lost the elections, that the PPP won the 2020 elections. Thank you.